Justice for Tom Bombadil. Hello. Is that too enthusiastic? Should I tone it back a little bit? Hi. Hey. This is just sparkling water with electrolytes. Gotta stay hydrated here in the desert, you know? So, this is everything I read in May. In May, I happened to read a lot because I did my first 24-hour readathon, which was very fun. I will have a video of that. So, I have like nine things to talk about, I think. Yes, 9 things to talk about, and we're going to go in order of worst to best. That's what we're going to do today. So, starting with the worst read of the month. It's this one. It's this one. This was the worst of the month. In fact, this will absolutely be on the worst books of the year. I already know it. It's The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is book 2 in a trilogy of a YA fantasy. Every time I talk about this book, pretty much every time I talk about any book that I don't like, my voice gets very biting and sarcastic. So apologies. I need to learn how to be more respectful of things that I don't like. But this book was really not good. And I have a reading vlog where I kind of just went on a couple of tangents about this book. I realized as I was editing that reading vlog, the thoughts that I was having were very unstructured and very not productive. So I apologize for that. Now that I've had some time to process and think about it and I wrote down some thoughts, I have more structured, objective criticism of this book. So I hope that that is better. I hope that you accept my more structured criticism versus my just ranting. Maybe I should back up just for a second and give a brief synopsis. So this is book 2. Book 1 starts with our young woman, our protagonist, Evangeline. She has a love interest. They're teenagers. I don't know how you can know you're in love when you're a teenager, who suddenly turns on her and is set to marry her stepsister. And Evangeline is like, what the heck, bro? We were just in love last week. Why are you marrying my stepsister? And she can't get answers. So she says, okay, clearly he's under some type of spell and I need to break up this wedding before it happens. And so she enlists the help of what's known as a fate in this fantasy world. It's kind of like a god, but they walk amongst mortals. So basically this is the fate, the prince. He's a fate and a prince. He's known as Jax, the Prince of Broken Hearts. The Prince of Hearts? Prince of Hearts. And she's like, hey, you're a fate who deals with hearts. Can you help me end this wedding? And of course, he's a tricksy little fellow. And so he's like, of course, I will help you with this, but it comes at a cost. So they create this little agreement that she will give him 3 kisses of his choosing at his point when he decides. Now, the way he breaks up that wedding is not what she expects, and then it sends them on this adventure into the magnificent north, away from where she's from, and into this whole other kingdom that's supposed to be kind of wintry and magical, which is another gripe of mine. I felt like we didn't get enough of that scene setting. It's built up so much, this magnificent north, and then it doesn't really have it doesn't play a huge part in the story, which I just think is a really big missed opportunity. So anyways, book 1 is kind of shenanigans of them going into the north. Jax wants Evangeline to compete for the heart of a prince in the north. And she is kind of like, what the heck? I wanted to be with my true love back in our hometown, and you've sent me on this just wild goose chase. And she ends up married to that guy. So now she's like a princess or a queen of another land. And then there's murder plots. And she finds out she's kind of potentially the key to this really age-old prophecy. So anyways, that's kind of book 1. And then book 2 picks up right where we left off on a cliffhanger. And Evangeline is basically just in the castle of the Magnificent North. And she keeps running into her old love from the other town. He has ended up in the Magnificent North. She's with Jax all the time, who bothers her, but there's also this enemies to lovers plot starting. And then she runs into this other guy. So there's vampires in this world. So she runs into this vampire named Chaos. And then her stepsister is around. She's followed her to the north. There's like the prince that she married. He's under a spell. Basically, most people that she's interacting with in this world are love interests or men that she could potentially have a thing with. And those are all of the interactions. And book two is so meandering. Finally, like 3/4 of the way through this book, we get somewhere with learning more about this prophecy and how Evangeline can help. And a couple of things move forward with that kind of big prophecy and everything. But so much of this book truly is just her walking around and having interactions with all these different men and like trying to suppress her feelings for Jax, the Fate, who's still around and still bothering her, but like maybe has a thing for her too. So, anyways, that's kind of the main plot. That wasn't the best explanation. But that's what's going on in this book. So now back to my main gripes. So here we go. So the first thing I didn't like about this book is the bad writing. Now, I have not read any other books by Stephanie Garber. Stephanie? Did I say Stephanie? Stephanie Garber. I have heard that potentially her other series, Caraval, is better, but that's also still YA, like romance fantasy, so that's probably still a no-go for me. But the writing in this is just, there's no flow. It just falls flat. It feels like it's trying too hard. The same descriptions are used over and over again for different characters, such as Jax. He smells like cold chaos and apples. And he always smells like that. I still don't understand the apple thing. Maybe I missed something in book one. I don't know why he eats apples all the time. I don't know. I don't understand it. And I'll never forget that he eats apples because it's in every scene. It's just, you just get smacked over the head with people's characteristics. If somebody has a quirk or, yeah, like a quirk, it never lets up. And there's never a scene without that quirk. It's like an old high school TV show where there's a nerd and there's never a scene where the nerd doesn't have a calculator or homework or something. And it's like in this, it's like Jax is this like fate prince guy who likes apples and he's always eating an apple. And it's like, I don't know, it just feels so contrite. Is that a word? Trite? Contrite? The other thing with the bad writing is there just is not a paragraph that's more than 4 to 5 sentences. It's so choppy. There's such a lack of description. And the thoughts of our protagonist are just spelled out to the letter, to the pixel, really. Like if you were wondering if she realized something or figured something out, well, actually, you're never wondering because you're always told, you're always smacked over the head about if she understood something and then making sure you understood it as the reader too. There's no space and no breath for a reader to figure anything out or for there to just be a hint of realization from the protagonist. It's just like everything is spelled out for you. And I hate that. It's really bothersome. It makes for a really unenjoyable reading experience. And I do understand that this is geared towards a young adult audience, but even young adults are not this stupid. And also, I feel like books when I was a young adult didn't do this as bad as books now for young adults. Like, do writers think that readers are more stupid today and need more hand-holding with like what's going on in their stories? I don't know, but it's really bothersome. Another gripe I have is lack of character development. This book does take place right after the events of book one and just continues on, and I think that it's literally only been like a couple of weeks or a month of adventuring. So much has happened. But Evangeline is just as dumb and uninformed and stupid as she could ever be. Like, she has not learned anything. There's just such a lack of problem solving and common sense in this girl's head. And it's hard to take it seriously. I mean, it's hard to take anything about this seriously. So she just has nothing else going on in her little brain. Like she just doesn't, and she just decides to walk over here and waltz over there. And there's vampires and murder plots and curses and prophecies. And like she's still just kind of like, okay, I'll walk over here. And yeah, everyone else in the book, their purposes don't make a lot of sense. For example, there's someone who almost gets murdered, and I don't even remember who did it because nobody's motives would make sense, and it could have been any of them. And I literally don't remember, and I just read this. And I feel like that's a sign of just not a good plot with good character development if you can't even remember who did something because no one's motivation is there to do it. Another thing that bothered me about this is that there definitely feels like a lack of structure and a lack of rules to the magic system in this world. I've heard that talked about a lot with fantasy books. I'm no expert, clearly, but when you lack structure and you just let your magic system be open-ended and allow anything and everything to happen in your magic system, it just becomes difficult to follow because your people can just do whatever they want whenever they want. So it's like, if that's allowed, then why can't they just solve all the problems or whatever? So it's really difficult to follow like what's allowed and what's not allowed in this magic system because new things just kind of pop up whenever. The other thing I didn't like about this is like the love interest, Jax the Fate. Like I feel like he's kind of being honed in as the main love interest, even though she's technically married to this other guy, which is another complaint of mine because technically she is caught in this actual affair because she's married and like she kind of likes that guy, but she kind of feels like she kind of likes Jax more. And Jax is doing this thing where he's like, I secretly love you, but I don't want to like get you hurt or anything like that. So I'm just going to be super mean to you and hope that you leave me alone. And I hate that. Like that is the dumbest thing of all time. I think that that is so stupid. When a character does that in a book or a movie or a TV show, it just completely, you've lost me. You have lost me because nobody does that in real life. Who does that in real life? Give me one example. I'll wait. No, I won't actually wait. But I just think that that is the dumbest, most immature thing that you could ever have happen in your book. And I don't like it. I don't like the kind of technically there's infidelity in this book, so I don't really like that. That's kind of like an automatic no-no for me. So I can't really root for them because she's like literally married to this other guy. This is like the last gripe that I have. But this is marketed towards like a young adult audience. From what I knew, it was kind of marketed as like no sensual sexual content, and this totally had some stuff that I was like, wow, I would not want my 12, 13, 14-year-old daughter to read that. And that kind of caught me off guard because I thought this was supposed to be a very like innocent book, and there was some stuff that I was like, okay. Oh, my last gripe with this book are the character names. We have characters named things such as Chaos, Vengeance, Honora, like honor, but with an A at the end. Honora. And then we have characters named Lala and Jax. And I'm like, is this a Vanderpump Rules reunion? Like, what is going on? I'm just waiting for like a Sheena to show up in book 3. So that's what I have to say about this. I really like, I'm tempted to give it a 1. I think I put 2 stars on Goodreads, but it might be like a 1.5. This is just, it has like no redeeming qualities for me, unfortunately. But I already own book 3. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to read book 3. I'm going to try not to delay reading book 3 for much longer because I read book 1 in the fall and book 2 now. So I feel like I should just get book 3 over with and have this under my belt as one of the worst trilogies, worst pieces of fantasy or literature that I've ever read. Can this even be called literature? I don't know. I don't think it counts as literature. But what do I know? So that's The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. I would not recommend it for literally anyone. No, yeah, I just wouldn't. So that was book 1. Wow, 25 minutes into filming and I only made it through 1 book. The next thing is We the Animals by Justin Torres. This is a small, sorry, you can see my ring light. Oh my gosh. The longer I think about this and digest this, the less I like it. At first, I thought it's a family tale of ups and downs, and despite the trauma and the poverty and the potential abuse that's going on in this family, they love each other and the brothers love each other because it's about three brothers and their family, their parents. And I was like, I felt like I was forcing myself to think that way. I felt like I was kind of gaslighting myself into liking this. I was like, look, like it's a family saga and it's written in kind of like poetic contemporary prose. It's got to be good, right? And I was trying to just like force myself to think that way. And the longer that I think about it, the more I don't like it. It just felt like the author was trying to convince me of something that was not there and something that did not come to life through these words. And then I was like, well, it's Vanity Fair calls it a gorgeous, howling coming of age novel that will devour your heart. And New York Times says that it's haunting. So I've got to like it, right? And no, I don't have to. And you don't have to like anything either. And the longer that I sit with this, the longer I don't like it. It just felt like it was trying too hard with its kind of like, I don't know exactly the right wording to use, but the things that came to mind were like contemporary and postmodern, kind of abstract and poetic and unstructured and also plotless. Just felt like in a very like synthetic type of way, he was trying to like force you to feel a certain way without like doing the work within the pages to really make a reader feel that way. Most of this book is just kind of like little vignettes and stories about the family, about the brothers growing up. A lot of it is plural first person plural, sorry, like we, and the brothers are kind of speaking in this chorus. So it's like, oh, we and us and we did this together. And then it about with like I think like a quarter or even a fifth of the book left, things start to shift or they just kind of shift very abruptly. And it goes from first person plural to first person singular I, and he starts to kind of, our protagonist starts to kind of pull away from, sorry, I hit the microphone, pull away from his brothers, and they start to become kind of separate entities. And then kind of out of nowhere, the book takes a turn from like family and poverty and tragedy and like trying to like get through hard times as a family, and it just switches into like some things that the main narrator goes through like as a teenager. It was very unexpected. It felt very like choppy, like just kind of like, okay, that was that, and now here's a different thing that we're going to talk about for the rest of the book for like 15 pages. I feel bad like critiquing this because I think this is kind of very autobiographical in a way of the author's life, and like I don't want to critique his life, but just the way that he kind of structured this into a book, it just felt very forced and it felt very try hard. And I just think that it could have been much more impactful if it was written in a different way. But it just like, it felt like a workshop, writer's workshop type of book. And he actually, this author was a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop. I just feel like you can tell when someone's gone through like a college workshop or like an MFA program. This is the type of book that like you read that he went to the Iowa Writers Workshop and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because of the way that this is written. So overall, I did not like it. I would give it like a 2-star rating. And it didn't work for me. The next thing I read for the readathon was The Brief, right? Yeah, The Brief and Frightening Reign of Phil by George Saunders. This is a tiny little book. I like the feel of it and the size of it, but I did not really like this book. This is another like 2-ish star for me from the readathon, and as time goes on, I feel more critical of it than I did kind of right in the moment of the readathon. It was interesting and it was very unique. I will give it that. But as a whole, I think it was like too bizarre for me. I looked up a little bit of the context and kind of why George Saunders wrote this. And I found out that an illustrator named Lane Smith challenged Saunders to write a story in which all the characters are in abstract shapes. So that was kind of the prompt for this. And this also did, similar to the last one in kind of a different way, but this did feel like something that George Saunders was like writing while he was teaching a class, maybe. I don't think that was the case because he spent like quite a few years writing this as just kind of a side project. But that's what this felt like, is just kind of like he's a writing professor and he, oh, sorry, my leg is asleep. I have to adjust it. Okay. It just felt like this was something that he, as a professor, was writing while he was teaching a class along with his students, and they were writing stories, and so he wrote this like along with them anyways. But that was helpful to know that this was kind of a prompt given by like a friend or a colleague, because this was just a very wacky little book, and it had a very similar vein to Animal Farm in its kind of political allegory. But Saunders himself said that these characters are conglomerates composed of flesh and machine parts and vegetative portions, which helped kind of understand why this was so weird, because all of these characters are truly just kind of like abstract beings. They don't really make sense and their descriptions are really confusing. For example, one of them is a tuna fish can with a belt buckle, and one of them has like a conveyor belt where his brain sits atop and his brain can fall off the conveyor belt and he loses his brain a lot. It's that wacky. It's that wacky. The basic premise of this is that there are two lands, Inner Horner and Outer Horner. Yes, like horn. And Inner Horner is such a small land that only one citizen can technically like be in the land at a time. And then the rest of the like 5 or 6 citizens sit outside in like the waiting zone of Inner Horner as they wait for their turn to be the citizen for a certain amount of time. And Outer Horner is kind of just a broad, expansive land that has very wacky features. For example, it has like a lush field where cow heads grow out of the ground and complain about people as they walk by. I'm telling you, this is crazy. That's why it just kind of feels like a university class project and not an actual book. But anyways, one day the land kind of shifts and suddenly the citizens of Inner Horner are trespassing into Outer Horner. And a citizen named Phil of Outer Horner decides to become kind of a tyrant and start bossing them around and taxing them and become this, tyrannical leader. He kind of takes over from the outlandish president of the land. That's kind of the basic premise of this, and I can't say much more about it besides it's just so wacky and outlandish. Basically, like I couldn't stop picturing kind of a Nickelodeon cartoonish version of this, so it sort of feels like SpongeBob meets Animal Farm to me. And take that with what you will. Take what you want from that. I did not really like this. It was strange. It is kind of how I feel after watching an episode of SpongeBob, where I'm kind of just like, okay, like that was a lot. And I would say that this is just like very absurd and outlandish. And if you need a kind of slightly absurd but a little bit more enjoyable political allegory, you're better off picking up Animal Farm than The Brief and Frightening Reign of Phil. That's what I'll say about that. 2 stars. So next I read a book by Yoko Tawada called The Emissary. This was translated from the Japanese by Margaret Mitsutani. This was probably my most disappointing read of the month because I had such high hopes for this based on the synopsis on the back. It sounds really, really interesting. It says it's a breathtakingly lighthearted meditation on mortality, and that after suffering a massive, irreparable disaster, Japan cuts itself off from the world. Children are born so weak they can barely walk. The only people with any get up and go are the elderly. And then it follows a young boy who lives with his great-grandfather, and they carry on a day-to-day routine in what could be viewed as a post-Fukushima time. It says, deftly turning inside out the dystopian scenario, Yoko Tawada creates an irrepressibly funny, playfully joyous novel. And that kind of confused me as I neared the end of this book because I was like, where is the funniness? Like, where is the lighthearted? What am I missing? Am I reading the same book as everybody else? Like, I missed the humor and I didn't really get it. And it also says that one of our main, like the main kid, Mume, is full of wit and free of self-pity, and he's a beacon of hope. And I just like did not pick that up. I don't know. I just did not get what is promised from this book on the back. And I do feel a little bit of validation because I'm not the only one who feels that way. I went on Goodreads and there are a lot of mixed reviews about this, or just kind of like meh reviews about it, that say the same thing. Like the synopsis on the back promised me one thing and the book gave me another. So I'm not alone in feeling this way. And I just feel like this was really kind of a letdown because I was so interested in this kind of dystopian world where young people are born kind of already struggling and the elderly like are living longer and not dying anymore. And they're trying to kind of carry on the next generations, but at the same time, like feeling so emotionally devastated and sad from everything that they've witnessed over their lives. And the kids are like physically frail and not able to do as much, but they're kind of like more hopeful. So it's just kind of this weird like dynamic and dichotomy between like the older generation and the newer generation. There was also like a bunch of other concepts in this dystopian world that were really interesting, but they were just kind of like thrown around without a lot of exploration. Like, for example, Japan like reverts back to any language, like they ban any language that's like from a foreign nation. They also just kind of really encourage like political correctness. For example, like Labor Day is renamed. And it's renamed to Being Alive is Enough Day. So they're just kind of like trying to like be very gentle on people, but also they've just shut down. And I think all the countries in the world, I think if I recall correctly, it's like all the countries in the world have shut down borders and just every country has kind of cut itself off and just becomes like its own entity with nothing foreign happening. And Japan like bans words that are from foreign languages and they can only use like language and words that have always been Japanese and have not been like used from other languages or other cultures. Somehow the environmental disaster that the world has gone through in this book created natural gender changes. So people switch genders multiple times throughout their life. And that was kind of just like thrown in there and then not really explored all that much. So that was a little bit confusing. I don't know how that kind of like played back into the environmental disaster and like everything else that was going on, the frailty of the kids and everything. I don't know. The end of the book, it just left me desiring a lot. And honestly, I don't even have like a whole lot to say about this book as a whole, like with its themes, because I really don't know what it was going for or like what I was supposed to get out of it. I didn't get much out of it. And that was a pretty big disappointment. So I do have another book by this author on my shelves, and I'm cautiously optimistic for that one, but I don't know because that one's called Memoirs of a Polar Bear, so that one could be even more wacky than this one. I guess I would give this like a 3 star. I don't know. It wasn't even that enjoyable to read, so I don't know, maybe even lower than that. But yeah, this was a pretty big disappointment, especially with such a beautiful cover and just a really interesting synopsis. I was just expecting it to be so much better than it was, and it really let me down. So, a bummer, a big old bummer. Next is The Housekeeper and the Professor. My mom took my copy when she left from visiting, so that's why I don't have my physical copy. But I read this for the World Tour Book Club, and this was the choice for this month. And this was really good. I don't want to repeat too many things that I say in a reading vlog that's coming out kind of probably in the same week that this video is being posted. So if you want more detail, go watch that video. But this was really good. I would give it like a 3.5 to 4 star rating now with kind of more time passing as I've read it. It's just this kind of soft, understated book all about the characters. There's this old professor who only has an 80-minute short-term memory, and the younger-ish, I think she's like maybe 28 or 30 year old housekeeper who is sent by her housekeeping agency to take care of him in his home. And also her son plays a big part in it, and comes over to the professor's house, and they form a really great bond as well. So it's just kind of all about these characters. It's a very kind of self-contained story, very, very sweet. I really liked the protagonist. It's told from the housekeeper's perspective, and I just felt like she was a really solid character. My rating kind of declined a little bit from 4 stars to maybe like a 3.5, just like kind of getting swept up in other things that I've read recently. It just sort of like fell down the ratings a little bit, but it's not that I didn't like it. It's just kind of this like I said, kind of soft and quiet book, but I did like it. And it's not too overly cheesy or sappy, so I liked it for that reason as well. And I would recommend it if you just need something kind of sweet and soft, and you don't mind a lot of talk about baseball and math. And it's easy to kind of like skim over those parts if you're not necessarily interested in those two topics. But those two things are talked about a lot because he is a professor of mathematics and he has his memory from prior to the car accident that took his short-term memory. So he talks a lot about math to kind of like connect with the world and connect with the people around him. And then he also likes baseball, and the housekeeper's son likes baseball, so they talk about that a lot. So it didn't necessarily annoy me too much, even though I don't really like those topics all that much. But yeah, it could potentially bother you if you don't really like those topics because they're talked about a lot. But overall, I did like that as a book. Excuse me. Then I read a book called Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. There's still sticker residue, which is kind of annoying to me. So this one I liked so much better. It made me cry. This is about a father, and he is a writer and a scholar about Ted Hughes, who I don't know much about, but that's kind of talked about in the novel, and then his 2 young sons, and they have tragically lost their wife slash mom, and they're in the depths of grief. It happened suddenly and in a tragedy, and they're grieving. And a talking crow arrives at their house, who is just kind of this like magical figure. And he sort of, if you've ever seen the movie Nanny McPhee, when she's like, when you want me but no longer need me, then I'll leave. And that's kind of what this crow does to them. He's like, I'm going to help you like face your grief, and you're not necessarily going to be done grieving by the time I leave, but there will be some point where you don't need me anymore, and then I'll head out. But for now, I am this physical manifestation of grief, and I'm going to help you process what happened with your wife and your mom. So, I think like my least favorite part of this was the crow's dialogue and kind of his character, because I didn't really know what to do with it. A lot of the times it seems like he's speaking gibberish and just like nonsense. But I think that I should look up more context about Ted Hughes and the Crow stuff because I know that kind of connects, but I don't know much else. I saw that talked about in a couple of other reviews on Goodreads, and I think with that context, it would maybe make more sense what the Crow is saying sometimes, but a lot of times he just doesn't really make sense. He says, I was, after all, the central bird. I'm a template. I know that. He knows that. A myth to be slipped in, slip up into. Inevitably, I have to defend my position because my position is sentimental. You don't Thanks, Cricket. You don't know your origin tales, your biological truth, accident, your deaths, mosquito bites mostly, your lives, denial, cheerfully. I am reluctant to discuss absurdity with any of you who have persecuted us since time began. What good is a crow to a pack of grieving humans? A huddle, a throb, a sore, a plug, a gape, a load, a gap. But I care deeply. I find humans dull except in grief. There are very few in health, disaster, famine, atrocity, splendor, or normality that interest me. But the motherless children do. Motherless children are pure crow. For a sentimental bird, it is ripe, rich, and delicious to raid such a nest. So, yeah, I don't really know what to do with the crow like dialogue and kind of what he's saying, but I understand kind of what he's representing. And my favorite parts were we swap points of view between the dad, the 2 brothers who kind of, or the 2 boys who kind of speak in one voice, and then the crow. My favorite vignettes were the dads because they were just like the most honest and raw. Those made me cry. The way he kind of talks about like their small moments and the way she didn't like awards shows but would pretend to watch them, or their little template fights, and just everything he misses about their relationship and like how much he loved her. That part was so emotional. There's something about like reading from a man's perspective about how much he loved or loves his partner. That just really got to me emotionally. It was so beautiful. And that was my favorite part. And I think that was kind of what I needed to get most out of this book right now, were just those statements from him about the grieving process. There were a couple of things that really stood out. It also made me emotional when the dad talks about like 2 years later, he brings a woman home and they're intimate and like talking about the differences between her and his wife and like just how much he still misses her. And he said it felt far too soon, but perfectly timed. And I don't know, just everything about this was so emotional. And I can't even like imagine the feelings of losing a spouse in death. My favorite quote from it was, "Moving on as a concept is for stupid people, because any sensible person knows grief is a long-term project. The pain that is thrust upon us, let no man slow or speed or fix." It's just a very poignant statement about grief and healing and moving on, as people say. So yes, this was very good. It made me feel like maybe I need to read more books about grief and sadness, because I feel like I need it. I feel like I've been trying to use a lot of books as like escaping from those feelings, but maybe sitting down and facing it, finding words for my own sorrow and grief, and connecting with books by people who have documented grief and sadness in their own words, like that might feel better in a season of hard times than just trying to escape it. And that's what this little book gave me. So yeah, this gets like a solid 4-star rating for me. I really liked it. I think I'll revisit it a lot, especially in different seasons of grief. Like obviously this is tackling like the death of a loved one, but you could read this and get a lot out of it with other types of grief as exampled by me. So yes, this was really good, emotional and hard, but really good, and I liked it a lot. And again, like it still does have that kind of like modern contemporary poetic type of stuff going on, but something about this was more palatable for me. I don't know. It's really hard to explain like why this worked, but the other one didn't, except that this just had a clearer depiction of like a magical realism component that made the whimsy and the poeticness like make more sense, I guess. I don't know. That's like the best way that I could sort of describe why this worked and the other one didn't, when they're like fairly similar-ish. Different content and different topics. Yeah, this one, I don't know. I just really, really liked it. Yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about it. We have 3 more to talk about. So the next one I read is Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. This was very good, solidly good. So remember when I said earlier during the Ballad of Never After review that infidelity is like an automatic no, don't like that. So that still stands. But this book, it doesn't like celebrate it, and it doesn't like idolize an affair. It's just kind of like the central concept of this book. So that's why I liked this book and I didn't DNF it, even though the main character is going through some stuff. Holy cow. This guy is, he needed a reality check, and he needed someone to just kind of smack him over the head and say, "Hey, wake up, buddy. Get your life together." Uh-oh, I need to change my battery. One sec. Okay, I had to change the battery in my camera, but we're back. Okay, Ethan Frome. This is a little classic by Edith Wharton. This is my first Edith Wharton. I definitely want to read more from her. I think this is her most, like, not, this is out of her niche of usually she talks about like high society New Yorkers. And this one is about a small town in, is it Massachusetts or New England, it just New England countryside. So it takes place in the New England countryside, and Ethan Frome is kind of a very poor farmer rancher guy, not doing super well. His wife, Xena, yeah, Xena, is described as kind of cruel, kind of harsh. She's ill all the time. She's kind of a hypochondriac. She also has very rigid, harsh facial features, fake teeth, and she snores. He's really kind of going in on her negative qualities, you know? He's really just, he has that lens on of seeing only the negatives from his wife. She's also a lot older than him, but she helped take care of his dying mother, and then they got married. So that's kind of their backstory. And then this takes place during a time when Xena needs more help around the household. And so she invites her younger, beautiful, vivacious cousin, Maddie, to live with them, with the Fromes, to help her around the house. And Ethan starts to have feelings for Maddie, the younger cousin, starts to kind of romanticize life with her and envision running away with her. And there starts to be a lot of tension between the two. They finally get time alone when Xena has to go to the doctor. Real nice, Ethan. Your wife's at the doctor and you're fantasizing about her cousin and whispering sweet nothings to her while your wife is away at the doctor. Like, come on, dude, that's not cool. There's a lot of melodrama in this. Like Ethan is, he very much is just kind of like, he's just really, really melodramatic. And he's so like in love with Maddie and over the top. And she's just kind of this young girl who I think like maybe has feelings for him. But also I think there's definitely like at least 5, if not close to like 10 years of an age gap between the two of them, which really adds an interesting dynamic to the story. But anyway, there's kind of a big melodramatic climax at the end of this book. And then the ending is like so not what I expected. What becomes of these star-crossed lovers in this forbidden affair is probably not what you're expecting, but I feel like it was the perfect ending to this book. And if you haven't read it, I won't spoil it. But I will say, this is not a huge spoiler, but I do think that the most redemptive character arc is Xena. It says on the back that she's difficult and suspicious, but it's like, well, of course she's difficult and suspicious. She knows that her husband is unhappy with her and wants to run off with her younger, more beautiful cousin. Like, how would you feel if you knew your husband felt that way? Of course you'd be difficult and suspicious. Like, she has a right, she's rightfully suspicious because he's like fantasizing about other lives without her. So anyways, that gets me really fired up. It's like, it's not her fault that she's suspicious because he gave her something to be suspicious about. Come on. Justice for Xena. So anyways, I just feel like she got the most, like, at the end of this book, you're kind of like, she did the right thing out of, like, she's kind of the one getting the short end of the stick and, like, getting complained about and, like, also having her husband, like, fantasize about another woman. But what happens at the end of this book, like, she did the right thing and the honorable thing. So I'm just saying, Xena for the win. She deserves better than what she got. Ethan and Maddie, whatever. I won't spoil everything that occurs with the fates of both of them. But yeah, I just think Xena deserved more. But anyways, even though this is about like a man fantasizing about another life, and another woman besides his wife, which I really don't like. That's not enjoyable for me to read about. I don't like infidelity. We don't like affairs. But there was something very entertaining and very kind of addictive about this melodramatic book. And I liked it. I liked it. I don't know what I can say. It was entertaining, and it was very interesting to kind of read a controversial, sort of like edgy book from like a century ago. I think that's super, super interesting. Reviewers had strong reservations about Ethan Frome when it first appeared in 1911. But they praised Edith Wharton's artistry, the stylistic elegance of her short novel, which I totally agree with. She writes very well, and I'm very excited to read more Edith Wharton. I'm very interested to get to The Age of Innocence at some point. I feel like that's kind of like maybe a good early fall, early autumn read. Maybe. Let me know if you've read that and like when is a good time of year to kind of read that book, if any. Or is it like a springtime read? I don't know. Anyways, Ethan Frome, I'm glad that I read this. That was a good one. 4 stars. I liked it. Okay, now we get to my 2 favorite reads of the month. So the first one is, no surprise, The Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. Loved it. I knew this would be a 5 star. Like, The Lord of the Rings was just kind of a shoe-in for my all-time favorites bookshelf, and I'm glad I just am finally solidifying that because I've never read them all the way through. But I'm such a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I like they're my favorite movies of all time, I think. You just can't get better than The Lord of the Rings. And I'm also into the Two Towers because for the Game of Tone fur, that's such my like Colorado Western USA accent coming out. For the Game of Tomes book club, for the Game of Tomes book club, we're getting through the whole Lord of the Rings in May and June. So I'm on the Two Towers, and I'm just loving it. I'm loving it. Having the time of my life. Reading these has continued to solidify my opinion that Peter Jackson's movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, are some of the best adaptations ever made because the tone and the style and the characters and the dialogue and the scene setting and just everything is so spot on. Like practically every single detail is so spot on between the books and the movies. And of course, I wish we had Tom Bombadil in the movies like everybody else does. Loved him so much. Justice for Tom Bombadil. Everything else with the movies just is so perfectly seamless. And reading these just feels like I'm watching the movies in slow-mo. I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't find the books as exciting because I've seen the movies like 500 times each, extended version, of course. That maybe I was just too familiar with the story that it wouldn't be exciting to read the books, but I was wrong. Like, I am so enveloped in this world. I'm also, like, I'm reading, physically reading, like this, along with the audiobook, listening to the audiobook that's narrated by Andy Serkis. So I truly do just feel like enveloped in Tolkien, and I love it. It was such an enjoyable month during May to just have this companion around with me. I just didn't think I was going to feel this way about something that I know the ins and outs to so well. I could quote literally every piece of dialogue from the movie and every scene I know by heart. So I just didn't think that I was going to feel this much emotion in the books. But I do, like, something about Tolkien's own words and descriptions of the evil things lurking in Middle-earth. Like, it's terrifying. It's so terrifying. And it also just feels like he does such a good job of balancing good and evil and feeling like you feel the stress of like, is good going to win out against this like absolute ultimate evil that's trying to take over Middle Earth? And like at the same time, Tolkien injects just pure, unadulterated hope into the story. And it feels pure and it feels real and it doesn't feel forced and it's just beautiful. And there's just this like faith element too of just like having faith and hope in the goodness. And that's just like really beautiful. And I love that. I love that. There were just so many different parts of this that I loved so much. And of course, like a lot of Gandalf's dialogue throughout the movies is in this first book, like a lot of the wise things he says throughout the movies. But there's one quote that like it did not make it into the movies that I feel like was so beautiful. And it's actually Haldir, and I love Haldir. Haldir is like such a good character. I love him so much. May have had a crush on him in the movies for sure. Like he's a great character. But Mary says, I have never been out of my own land before, and if I had known what the world outside was like, I don't think I should have had the heart to leave it. And Haldir says, not even to see fair Lothlorien? The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places. But still there is much that is fair, and though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows, perhaps, the greater. Some there are among us who sing that the shadow will draw back, and peace shall come again. Yeah. It's just really good. The other thing about this book that I love so much, and maybe it annoys some people, but I just love it, are how many songs and poems there are in the books. And especially because Andy Serkis like sings them on the narration. So I'm like reading along with the lyrics of the song while he's singing them. And it's just really nice. There should be more books, more fantasy books with little songs and jingles and things in them because I just love that. And the other thing in here that felt even more ominous than the movies is Gollum pursuing the Fellowship. Like, we get a few of those scenes in the movie of like knowing that he's behind them, but reading about it, it just felt so much more ominous and creepy than I imagined, especially because like Aragorn himself says like that creature is very dangerous. Aragorn saying that, that's a big deal. I love Lord of the Rings. What else can I say? Lord of the Rings for life. We love Lord of the Rings. We are a Lord of the Rings household, right, Cricket? We like Lord of the Rings more than Star Wars. We like Lord of the Rings more than Harry Potter. We like Lord of the Rings more than anything else. Lord of the Rings is top tier fantasy and literature. Okay, so that's the Fellowship, 5 stars, obviously. And next month you'll hear, I'll try to be brief about the Two Towers and the Return of the King because it's just going to be more of the same, just me fangirling over Tolkien. So, the last book that I read for May, a very unexpected 5 star, is a tiny little book, teeny tiny, called Address Unknown by Katherine Kresman Taylor. This was unbelievably good. I was thinking about something about this book. That made a lot of sense. I was walking my dogs earlier and I was thinking about this book, and what I realized is this felt like the adult version of reading The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne for the first time. Like a jaw-dropping ending and a book about World War II. That's like the easiest way I can kind of describe like the jaw-droppedness that it gave me was like reading The Boy in the Striped Pajamas for the first time and getting to the end of that book. The end of this book, my jaw dropped, truly. So this is a very, very short, it is so short. The actual book is 67 pages, and then there's an afterword that kind of explains a little bit more about why she wrote this and how she wrote this and about her life. And she was a really interesting woman. But this is an epistolary novel of letters sent between two men who were old friends and business partners in the art business. So we have Max, who is a Jewish man who still runs the art business. He's an art dealer in San Francisco. And then we have Martin, who recently returned to Germany with his family. And I don't know how she did it, but Katherine Kresman Taylor managed to fit so much of a story in these tiny little pages and this short little volume. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away, and it goes by so fast. This is weird, so stay with me, but it kind of reminded me of that 6-word story, like the shortest story to ever be written that's attributed to Hemingway, that just says, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." Sorry, I just hit the mic. Because this book has so much to say and to give you because of what it doesn't say, just as much as what it does. And what's not left on the page is just as important as what's put on the page. Basically, it's like the opposite of the Ballad of Never After book that's hitting you across the face with every character's thoughts. There is a plot and everything is driven forward with every single page. It's just such a good balance of like giving you the information without smacking you over the head and just like letting you like here it is, and then letting you pick up on things without being like, here's the story, here's everything that happened. Can you tell that I don't like over explanation? Like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves in life and in books is just like, you don't have to over explain something or like tell me something 5 times. Like, I got it. I'm smart enough. I can infer things without you over explaining. So that's, I think, a huge reason why I liked this so much as a story, is because she is so good at not over explaining. And the other reason why this is so good is because it just perfectly encapsulated like real life issues during World War II of people turning on each other, turning on loved ones, the brainwashing and the hive mind thinking that was happening. My battery and my memory card went out at the same time. Okay, let's finish this up. So I do think that this should be like required reading because of what it tackles politically and socially. This happens with all kinds of different groups of people. Obviously, we see it all the time. People turning on each other. So like, because of the content, I think it should be required reading in schools. And then because of the like exemplary storytelling, it should be used as an example of like brilliant writing and how you can say so much in so few words. Like it's both like such a good story and so important in its messaging. So I know it's like kind of weird to rave so much about a book that is about really dark stuff, World War II, anti-Semitism, Nazi brainwashing, like all of that. But this was such a good piece of writing, like to put it in these words with these characters, with this story structure, with the heartbreak and the haunting nature of like what happens to these characters. It's such a brilliant piece of literature, and I think like that is what makes it so good. I don't know, it was just so good, and I was not expecting it at all. Without a doubt, like one of the best things I've read so far this year, like top 3 best things I've read so far this year. Fellowship, East of Eden, Address Unknown. Like those are the best things I've read so far this year. So yeah, it's a dark book, but it's so well written. And I think I got my point across. I think I got it. I think don't need to over explain and hit you over the head a million times with how much I thought this book was so good. Me saying I don't like over explaining and then me going on and on and on and on about the same exact thing that I've been trying to say for minutes upon minutes. So this is everything I read for the month of May, and thank you for just hanging out with me and listening to me talk and ramble on about all of these books. Also, I did continue to read Game of Thrones. I just didn't have it on here because I didn't finish it, but I am continuing that into June as well. So I did read some of that in May. I'm just feeling really motivated and reinvigorated to read more. Because of how much success I had this past month. It's almost an addictive feeling of trying to chase that high again, that adrenaline rush in another book. But what I love about reading is it's like a delayed adrenaline rush because you have to make it to like the end of a book to get that satisfying like ending feeling. So anyways, I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore, but I just feel really excited about entering the month of June and reading more throughout the summer. Cricket, do you want to say bye? Come here. Come here, baby. Hop up. Hop up. Cricket says farewell. Do you have anything else you want to say? Oh, there's Ruby. Hi, Ruby. Okay, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the support, Ruby. Hi. You're such a sweet baby. Okay, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to my rambles on about these books, but I felt really good about my reading month. I don't know if you can tell in my voice and in my face that I just felt really good and really content with my reading for this month, which just makes me happy. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well. And until the next video, take care and read a lot. Okay, bye.
Old days, I used to blame me for crying, till I realized that I had needs you didn't meet. But that's all days, now that we see each other. Can we slow down, start over? Come closer.